Hey guys, Gareth here at Superior. We're doing a little quick tech tip here. We'll be installing these Motorsport hardware 78mm wheel studs on this E92 M3. Want to talk about the double nut technique to get these properly torqued. First, starting off by cleaning these studs. You can actually see how the brake parts cleaner is extra dirty in there. There's always going to be like a little bit of oil on the studs themselves from storage. You do have to put Loctite on them, so it's best to try to get any kind of contamination off the surface of the studs before using the Loctite. I'm just using this blue thread locker. You could use red if you want, but medium strength, which is blue, is going to be perfectly fine for this. You don't necessarily need red. You don't need a ton of thread locker. That's actually maybe a little bit too much. I can actually use that on another stud. But all I'm going to do right now is just thread these in by hand. These are the bullet nose style. They have a 5mm Allen on the end here. And what happens often is, take a 5mm Allen socket, put it in there, try to torque the stud to 25 foot-pounds. And you'll either round that off or you'll break the 5mm Allen off in the tip, because honestly 25 foot-pounds for a 5mm Allen is quite a bit. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to take two nuts, jam them together, and use that to physically torque the studs. Another thing that's really worth mentioning here is you want to make sure that the threads on the wheel hub are also clean as well. So run a thread chaser through them, a little bit of brake parts cleaner, blow dry them with air. You just want to make sure that the Loctite has an opportunity to actually cure in place. Now the 5mm Allen, you can use them to physically bottom out the threads. So this is what's nice about them is, I'm just going to use a 5mm Allen here, and I'm just going to run the thread in until it bottoms out. And then once they're bottomed out, I'll go ahead and install two nuts to show you the double nut technique. So it's really important that when you're doing this, obviously use a nut or two nuts that are the correct thread size. In this case, these are M12 by 1.5 studs. It's also important not to use the lug nuts that you're going to be using on your actual wheels. So if you have some old lug nuts, that's fine. If you have two flange nuts, that's fine. If you have two standard nuts, that's fine. You need to make sure though that they're not self-locking nuts. You need them to be able to jam together, and you don't want them potentially damaging or marring the threads. So what we're going to do here is, I'm just using two old lug nuts, and I'm going to thread the nut on as close down to the bottom of the stud as possible. I'm going to take the other nut and I'm going to thread that on like that. Now if you had two flange nuts, you'd be doing the same. The head of the nut's going to go on one side, they're going to be opposing to each other like that. And then from here, I'm literally going to jam these two nuts together so that they are tight. Like that. And just so you'll be able to actually see what's happening here, I'm going to make a mark on that inner nut. And Motorsport Hardware's recommendation for these studs is 25 foot-pounds. I'm using a counter hold here. I'm just using a pry bar on these two studs. You can also use a screwdriver in the caliper. I'm just doing it this way. And you can see that the line is moving there on the nut, which means that as we're torquing it, it's actually moving the stud. Sometimes it'd be very difficult to see that, so having that little line there as a reference is useful. And I'm just gonna double check it one more time. There we go. That's it. That's the double nut technique. In my opinion, that is the safest way to properly torque these studs. 25 foot-pounds with that Loctite, the studs will not come out. And that's how you want to go about properly installing these studs. This has been a really quick tech tip. Wanted to answer some questions for those of you out there who have ordered these studs and want to know how to install them. So I hope you learned something. If you have any questions or comments, leave in the comment box below. We'll get back to you with any of those questions that you have with an answer. And as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you for the next one.